We are live. WeatherBrains episode number 701. This is the pre-show. This is for June 24th, 2019. And thank you for being here. Thanks for allowing me to have a week off last week. Had a show. We produced it earlier, but anyway. So look what I just see here on the screen. Ooh, look at this. See if you can see that. That says, I don't think you can see that very well. This Hangout on the Air is live. Hangouts on the Air going away later this year. So you know what that means? We have to come up with a new platform, but that's okay. Google is famous for starting things and stopping things. It just happens. We've been using this platform, I think, for 6, maybe 7 years. I want to say maybe it was 2012 when we started doing video here. So that's okay. We'll come up with something different. But again, this platform has been pretty effective in that typically it's switched automatically. The video is switched automatically based on whoever is speaking, which makes it sure nice on me because contrary to what most people believe, I'm actually working at this hour of the day and do have things to do related to my actual job. All right, so I'm getting messages here from Bill Murray. Bill apparently is out tonight. I think it's 50-cent beer night at Hooters. You know the deal when he's out. And nobody else is here. Maybe it's just me tonight. I could go on a 90-minute tirade. So, see if I can get all of our guests on here. And again, maybe no guest, no other panelists, no regulars, just me. Like my shirt, Judge Schmales 2020. You'll get nothing and like it. Does anybody know what movie that's from? That's our trivia question, and by now most of you should know the answer is it starts with a C. Caddyshack from 1980, I think, 79 or 80. So let's see here. This is going to be interesting. Well, I know that Kim is out. She's on vacation this week. I was on vacation last week. Dr. John is out. But I think for Troy and Nate and Aubrey, they should be here tonight. So we'll see. We got 7 minutes. Typically, the first man on the show is Bill, but again, he's out. Yeah, Mark Sudduth is going to join us tonight. Mark has a new documentary on Hurricane Michael, and he sent me a little private link to that. And I've been out of town. I've not had a chance to watch it, but very anxiously will be doing that at some point soon. And I actually don't know. Let me check the way we do this. We have a shared calendar we all see, and let's see if I can get our other guest on here. And I don't see an email address for him. So this is good. I have no contact information for our guests. We have no other show members here. What can I do for 90 minutes to fill time? We're going to tell here in 6 minutes. Look what's on ABC here. I just missed it. This is when I miss J.B. Elliott greatly. Like they can't show that too long because they'll cut us off. This is the Bachelorette. This is on my channel. This is on ABC. And JB's comments over the Bachelorette on Monday night were classic. In fact, the Bachelorette, I have met her several times over the years. She is from here in my neck of the woods. Okay. Well, here I am by myself. Um, and the tweeter is full of sunset pictures. Oh, there's Nate. Thank goodness. You saved me.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Saved by the Nate.
How's it going?
You know what movie this is from?
Judge Smale. Good nothing. I feel like I should, but I don't watch a lot of movies, so.
Caddyshack.
Yeah, I definitely should know that one.
He was the Bushwood Country Club guy. I need to watch that movie again. I don't have any contact information for Mark or
It was in the email Bill
Andrew.
sent earlier, I thought.
Okay, I was just looking at the Google Calendar entry here. Let me go to the Gmail here. Let's see.
Thought it was in there.
It is. Here we go.
Okay, good. Whew.
I see Mark's in here. Let me try and get him on here first.
I'm going to send you Andrew's email.
Okay.
In the chat. There you
go. Okay. So we will invite him the traditional way. And if this doesn't work, we'll send the email link. In fact, I'll probably do that anyway. In that we have had problems in recent weeks.
It's just like Google to have something really cool and then kill it.
Yeah, you know, they've had a long history of that.
Oh, seriously?
Remember Google Wave? Most people don't even remember that one.
Oh, I remember Google Wave.
Reader.
Reader was the one that pissed me off. Pardon my French.
That was excellent. An excellent product, an RSS newsreader.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
still mad about that one. Still mad about that.
So yeah, well, I've got a pretty decent little piece of software that I use for television and other projects called Wirecast.
Okay,
I probably can make that work. We'd have to go to Skype.
I've used Feedly for RSS.
Oh yeah, for the RSS. Yeah,
but you just switched gears and we're talking about video.
Yeah, no, Feedly. In fact, I've got that in the browser.
Yep.
And I've got the app on my phone. I've got. Hello, Nate just hung up. Did we make him mad? No, I used Feedly and to kind of select sources I like, and then I look at Google News and Apple News, and you know it's just really strange. You just have to go to so many different sources to find a variety of.
Hey, look at that guy!
Oh yeah.
What's up?
So Mark, here's the question for you. Do you know what movie this is from?
Judge Smales. You'll get nothing like it.
Caddyshack.
You know what? I never saw Caddyshack. Shoot me now.
Well, no, I'm old. I mean, come on. This movie was from 1980.
I was 3.
1980. I was doing the weather on television in 1980.
I was, let's see, I turned 3 that year. So it's quite possible I was still doing things in diapers.
Yeah. That's probably not a good 3-year-old movie to watch.
I showed my, she was 5, I think, 5 or 6. And I showed my eldest daughter Spaceballs. My wife did not think that was very good.
Whoops.
But she went around the like couple days later. It was cloudy. It looks like it was going to rain. So I went and got my phone, and she's like, "Daddy, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm looking at the radar to see if it's going to rain." And she reached over and she pulls the phone down and she looks at it and she says, "Is it jammed?"
That's awesome. All right, I'm going to send the show link to Troy because he's not been able to get on the standard way. And since this platform's going away, they don't care.
Yeah. And
we need to move away from this.
You send
ASAP.
me the link. Send me the link too, and I'll send it to Andrew.
Yeah, I stuck it in the chat room there, and I did email that to him. And Mark, how did you get on here? Did you get the email, or did you?
I got the email and it worked.
Yeah, I got an email from you, James.
Okay. Well, and by the way, welcome to our television viewers. It is 31 minutes after the hour, Monday night. You know what night this is? It's WeatherBrains night. We're going to start this show in a matter of moments here. And let's see. I think Andrew is on here.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ooh,
great.
Very nice audio.
Oh,
wow,
yeah.
nice.
Serious business.
That sounds good.
All right.
Well, let's just roll it here. We'll see if Troy and Kevin and Aubrey will join us in just a little bit here. So let's get the recorders going. Number 1 and number 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's WeatherBrains episode number 701. 701. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. Thank you for joining us. We're back on our regular schedule this week. Had some vacation time last week, and we're back in the saddle. But this is vacation season, so we're going to have some of our regulars out. I know that Dr. John is out. I know that Kim Cloco, McLean is out. Bill Murray is out because whenever he's out, we know it's 50-cent beer night at Hooters. But Nate, the faithful, we're here, and welcome to you, sir. How are you?
Here. I'm good. I'm stealing Wi-Fi from the this Hilton property that I'm staying at here in Midtown Manhattan. So if I get a little fuzzy, that's why.
Okay. Well, awesome. Here comes Troy. By the way, one of our photographers just walked in and brought me this hat. I'm finally dressed tonight. I've got a Caddyshack T-shirt on and a Dallas Cowboys hat. For those that are listening, it's summer. You know, it's summer. I left this hat at a live shot, and the photographer was kind enough to retrieve my Dallas Cowboys hat. I got this at some weather talk I did in Dallas Fort Worth not too long ago. Troy, are you a Dallas Cowboys fan?
Nah, not really into professional sports that much. Love my college football. So
Aggies or Longhorns?
Aggies primarily, but I teach at UT and have been for 31 years. So I have, well, we don't play each other football anyway anymore, but so I follow the Longhorns as well and do a little work for them as well down here. So
his heart is in College Station, but the paychecks come from Austin.
The paychecks come from Austin and a little pay comes from College Station. So, you know, but got to go where I got the degree. So
I hear you. So before we bring in our guest, we got to bring in Mark Sudduth here. Mark, welcome to the show, man. You got some exciting news about a documentary that is being unveiled here. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's good to be back. After last year's hurricane season, I put together a documentary covering Florence and Michael and other events that led up to that. Really a 14-year journey of developing these unmanned cameras that we've talked about. You remember that I was on here with Brett Adair and Doug Kiesling right after Michael back in October 15th we were on. And since that time, a lot has happened in my life. And part of that is which to produce this documentary that I was very privileged and grateful to be able to show in 2 different movie theaters now, one in Wilmington, North Carolina back on May 30th. This is where Florence made landfall down here in Wilmington. And then down in Tallahassee back on June 12th, thanks to the support of a sponsor that helped to cover that cost, we actually showed it at Regal Cinemas. And now it's on Amazon Prime, and people are saying some great things about it. It makes me proud.
Cool.
That's awesome, and we'll explore more about this as we go. In fact, last week I spent some time on Cape Sandblass. I don't know if you guys know where that is. That's it's a little peninsula that's near Port St. Joe, and fascinating place. It's a north-south peninsula, so you get great sunsets this time of the year. But it's remarkable, Mark. You can still drive down the Cape. You know, one house will just be gone, and the next house they've rebuilt. It's a 50-50 blend. And we drove up to from Port St. Joe and up to Mexico Beach, and US 98 is still closed.
Right.
If you can believe that.
Yeah, they're redoing the bridge there just up from where Toucans was. And we were down there right after that June 12th showing in Tallahassee and went back to the gas station and some of those properties that were part of the shot, that sort of famous Mexico Beach GoPro shot that we have now. And it's remarkable. The progress is slow. And the place, I think you'll agree, it looks tired and run down. Like it's just hard. You know, it's the trees are dead and stuff's coming back. But, you know, Mississippi, we're coming up on 15 years now since Katrina, and you can still see the evidence there. It lasts for a long time.
Yeah, and also we have to remember, and the way we go down there, we go down through Mariana and Weehawken, and it's brutal. It's not good. The timber damage, the structural damage, and you look at some of these structures, and it's just like people just abandoned them. And I guess maybe they didn't have insurance, they didn't have a way of repairing it. They just left. They moved on to somewhere else, and it's going to take a long, long time. And we have to remember, not only is it Mexico Beach and Port St. Joe and Panama City, but it's also those inland communities from Weehawken back up to Mariana and even up into southwestern Georgia. I think, Mark, you understand it better than most. And most people don't get it, and that's why they need to watch your documentary.
Yeah, I mean, the documentary is an interesting contrast between Florence, the category 1 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, that turned out to be North Carolina's costliest natural disaster at over $20 billion, and this incredible flood that surpassed Floyd and Matthew, which those were historic in and of themselves. And then you contrast that just a few weeks later to this category 5 Michael that brought everything except the massive inland flood. There's certainly a lot of rainfall with Michael, but it moved quickly enough that the inland flooding was not as big of a deal. But that category 5 designation and the post analysis from the National Hurricane Center, you see that from this video, from that GoPro that we strapped to a utility pole, literally strapped it with a ratchet strap, and it survived. Everything was there. And that's what's part of the story. Us going back to get that box off the utility pole that night, Wednesday night, after it hit, and all of the build up to that. And then finally, about the last hour of it's a 2-hour documentary, so really the last hour is dedicated to Michael, but that last 30 minutes is definitely the wait for it movie of the summer, because I show you what the GoPro captured through transitions, through time, and there's no music, there's no narration for that part, just timestamps as Mexico Beach has changed forever. A remarkable piece of technology called a GoPro that looks like it came out of a Cracker Jack box. It's small, and it worked. It worked. So, you know, we just put something out that we knew would work, and we're very fortunate that the utility pole survived. It's and it's an amazing story.
And again, you say this is on Amazon Prime now, right?
That's right. Very lucky that independent filmmakers can put their work on Amazon Prime Video. If you want to have something on iTunes, you have to work through a movie studio, and it takes a lot more than what I have for a budget, which is zero. But Amazon Prime, you go through a vetting process. You can't just put, you know, Nate's Home Movies on there, for example. I'm sorry, Nate.
I don't even want to watch those.
So they do have a vetting process, and you have to be approved, and you have to have closed captioning and all this other stuff, and it has to be a certain format. And I work with an actual person there, and it helps set up the digital distribution. Reed Timmer has some of his work on there, and it's a great platform because it's global. Even though my documentary is translated only into English, I'm not quite into Japanese or German yet, but you know what? It's being seen in the UK and the United States through Amazon. And I am very proud of that. And I don't have to make DVDs anymore. Those are a real pain in the butt. And you can watch it on any device, anytime you want. It's called Tracking the Hurricanes with an S. Real easy to find. And this version 2018, we have 2017 on there as well. And that one's included with Prime. So if you have Prime, it doesn't cost you anything. But the other one, we do charge a nominal fee. Like, you pay $15 to go see an IMAX movie, I guess $15 if you're lucky. It's a great lesson in understanding hurricanes with our story of how we pulled it off as the backdrop. So I'm proud to be able to talk about it tonight with you guys.
Awesome. We'll talk more about it in just a little bit. But Nate, let's bring in our guest.
All right. Another one of these shows that was organized on Twitter. That seems to be my thing. I find stuff on Twitter and say, hey, come on the program. And they're like, cool. Andrew Bloom, best-selling author. He's been on Wired, got bylines on Popular Science, Vanity Fair, the New York Times, all places that I read from time to time and have never and probably will never write for. Pretty cool. Andrew, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I've been thinking about this for a long time.
Cool. I'm glad you're able to make it. So the book is called The Weather Machine by Journey Inside the Forecast. First off, tell me, so your last book was called, and I say this just that I can say it this way, Tubes.
Yeah.
A Journey. I'm sure you've never heard that before.
No.
Journey to the Center of the Internet. What does the Internet and weather, other than that you've written books about both of them, what's the common theme for you?
For me, they're both about these big, complex infrastructures. And they're not only that, but they're both infrastructures that we touch every day. Both the internet and the weather forecast are something most of us use, all the time. And we kind of think of them as black boxes. They just work. The forecast comes out, whether from a person or from our app. And what happens inside the machine is a bit of a mystery. And I love mysteries. I love the idea that there's this sort of it was the Sandy experience for me. It goes back to 2012 when suddenly there was this huge conversation about weather models, and I kind of vaguely knew that weather models existed, but had no idea how they worked. I had no idea what fed them. I had no idea who ran them, what was going on. And it was really kind of that exploration to find out, what was going on inside the box, and what was the entire global infrastructure that fed those models. And then what came out.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so that way, the weather infrastructure is very different from the internet infrastructure, but they're definitely both global, and we definitely both touch them every day.
So you mentioned that the Sandy experience and hearing and learning about the models and the American model and the European model.
That was the talk of that month, yeah.
So I've been in presentations with a number of folks, high-level folks within the Weather Service, including the director, who really chafe at the notion that we would talk about those on television. In your research, obviously you sort of got into this because of that conversation. And I think his saying is, we have the Hurricane Center, they're putting out the forecast, just focus on that and don't worry about the rest. Do you agree with that, having done all this research and looked into it, or do you feel like there might be a place for that kind of a conversation on television in the week and change leading up to a big hurricane like a Florence or a Sandy or a Michael?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we should understand, what we're connected to. I think we should understand that the tools that we use, and certainly in the case of a big hurricane, where we need meteorologists to put the pieces together to understand the impacts, all of that. But it's funny. I was less interested. For me, it was less about the kind of extreme events, where there's, where it's more than just kind of, what's it going to be tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more at stake. But I really, I have to confess, for me, it's been 10 years now that, I've been getting my weather from the browser or from the app, and to sort of begin to understand what these automated systems are that are supplying more and more of us with our weather, I think was really important. And then I also think it's, if you know more about how the system works, you're better prepared to take the forecast as given. I know you guys and a lot of meteorologists spend a lot of time sort of talking about the difference between what's said and what's heard. And I think understanding how systems work makes goes a really long way towards helping the general public discern, translate from what meteorologists are saying and what they're hearing, and what decisions they're making based on what forecast they're hearing.
So you said something there that it's been 10 years that you've been getting your weather from the browser.
Yeah.
And
at least
in the same
I should go back farther than that. I should go back to freshman year of college, 1995, on the VAX.
Yeah. Oh.
Where we would, and that was, and it was the second year of Weather Underground.
Yeah.
That used to be the written National Weather Service.
Back when you had to use Gopher. Remember that, James? Gopher?
Yeah. Telnet.
Yes.
Exactly. The early internet days.
So, you say that. So 15 years, 20 years. I was in high school then. That's a long time ago, longer than I want to admit. Is there a role for the human in this process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. It's I have to admit, it's a real evolution that I've had over my research with this. Because at first I was in love with the models. I said, these are incredible. I can't believe what they're spitting out. I was convinced that it was all just about reading the models.
And most college meteorology graduates fresh out of school agree with you on that.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, good.
And it takes them 10 or 15 years to.
But
wait a minute.
Yeah. But I just love this notion that a forecast is only as good as the decisions you can make based from it. Mm-hmm. And to make those decisions, that's a different that's a different thing from just knowing what hour it's going to start to rain, or how much snow there's going to be, or what the sort of the down to the decimal point that the models are spitting out, which means nothing to most of us. And I think it really I really feel we're kind of a bit of a inflection point, where the forecast is getting so good. And I think that for the general public, there's a lag in our ability to make decisions based on it. I saw it this spring, my daughter's softball games, my other parents would be like, so, is it going to rain on Sunday? And the ability to sort of recognize how much they could trust, if you look closely at, what the model, if you're looking at Weather Underground, I think, is the most accessible, sort of most finely detailed. If you look looking at that graph, what time the weather company forecasting engine thinks it's going to start to rain. There's a lot more detail in there than most of us are kind of sort of used to thinking about. And I think that's a real, that opens up a whole new set of possibilities. So I do think there's a bit of a lag between what the technology allows meteorologists to do and what the public is willing to hear, and the decisions they're willing to make based on what they hear.
So the book, y'all were kind enough to send me a pre-pub copy, and I devoured it in, I think, 1.5 plane rides.
Good.
Very readable.
Thank you.
And it sort of fits. I like travelogue type books. I'm not a big fiction guy, but this is a really interesting blend, I think, of meteorological history. There's some industry history here, and then this travelogue. I mean, you ran up some frequent flyer miles putting this thing together, right? I don't know how many. I want to go to Norway now, and I didn't want to before, and now I do.
It's possible I wrote this book because I wanted to go to Norway. But...
So tell me about Norway. I mean, tell people. I don't want to give the whole book away, but I think we can sort of peel into that piece. What was that like to walk in the footsteps of the Björknes?
Yeah, it was funny. Norway, it had a kind of visceral appeal to me because I love the weather. It's funny. My background is actually in geography, but not physical geography, but human geography. There you go. So I love places, and I love thinking about the way that buildings make places, and culture makes places, and all these, and weather makes places. So Norway had a kind of visceral appeal right from the beginning. And then when I remember seeing the portrait of Wilhelm Björknes sitting on the docks in Bergen, it was the Bergen School of Meteorology, sitting on the docks there underneath his umbrella. And just thinking that was just such a perfect encapsulation of this, of a historic meteorologist. And when I heard about the primitive equations, I thought it was just amazing that there was the primitive equations that were the things that were really driving forecasting, driving the models. So I went. I did sort of two big pieces. First, I went to kind of walk in Björknes's footsteps, and then I went to a place called Utsira, which is an island off the coast of Norway. To go see the weather station there, which is 150 years old, still has a human observer, The guy named Hans, who runs the cafe on the island, and then also writes down the observations in his book and punches them into the Norwegian meteorological web drop down menus to say what the weather's doing on Utsira to go into the system. And it was really to see that, and I have to admit that Utsira was a bit of a I really wanted to go to Jan Mayen. Has anyone ever heard of Jan Mayen? It's a Norwegian weather station. I think it's pretty close to the Arctic Circle, like all the way to Greenland. But you can only get there by military cargo plane, and it only goes like 4 times a year. So I would have had to go for 4 months, which I didn't think was going to fly too well at home. So Utsira is like it's like a half-hour ferry. But it was a place that I could see the sort of a weather station that hadn't changed in 150 years. And that is really important for European weather because it's out there in the North Sea. It's kind of always been a sort of first century point for storms coming in off the North Sea into Norway and eastward.
Going back in the history a little bit, you mentioned the the models and everything, and I think we always just sort of jump to models as computers. Yeah. But then with Hidden Figures and some of the books and movies that have come out recently, we start to realize that computers, even as late as the 60s and 70s, were actually people doing these calculations by hand in a lot of cases, and down to multiple decimal points of trigonometry. Tell us a little bit about weather's role, and it was like that in weather too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, the story that's often told, and which I tell a little bit differently, is about Lewis Fry Richardson, the English mathematician, who took Bjerknes's equations and tried to calculate them. He was famously wrong. And he famously thought that in order to calculate the equations faster than the weather, to make a useful forecast, he would need 64,000 computers, which is to say 64,000 people. And he describes the stadium that they should sit in. So he imagines that they were all sitting in a giant stadium, and there'd be a conductor telling them to sort of go faster, go slower, so they could do these simultaneous calculations in a way that was actually useful for a weather forecast. And I love it because it's basically the parallel processing that the supercomputers use at a far greater than 64,000, but of course not human computers, but silicon computers. But the idea that the original impulse to use the equations of physics to calculate the weather, and then to know the next day if you were right or wrong, and then to begin this 100+ year process of tweaking those equations to end up with the improvements that we're seeing today. I swear by the day a decade number. The skill of the models improving a day a decade. 5 day today is as good as 4 day 10 years ago. And I think that sort of that kind of iterative process of saying, how can we tweak this? How can we make it a little bit better? How can we test today's model against all of our records of the last 40 or 50 years of history and make it better still? And the fact that we all get to touch that infrastructure every day was really, really what got me going.
I think I did a number of papers. Being a computer science meteorology double major, Richardson was sort of a key figure in my sort of meteorological upbringing, as it were. Yeah. I always thought he got a bum rap.
Nate Silver didn't do him any favors either. I think
no. But I mean, you look at how we do it today, and there's really not a lot of difference. I mean, there's the blueprints were there, and I think you see those, in the way we do a lot of forecasting now in terms of parallel processing and multiple cores running these calculations simultaneously, and then grid cells and everything. I mean, there's a lot of that I think was not recognized in his time.
And amazing to me that 1904 Bjerknes publishes his main paper, but it takes call it 60, 70 years for that to actually be useful. And the whole time it was kind of they're buzzing in the background of meteorology. And, meteorologists were still doing their thing with lots of success. But it was that the idea never went away, but it just took the cohesive global observations. It took supercomputers. It took all these other technologies to really make it useful.
I did a presentation a couple of years ago pairing Moore's law and the approximate doubling. This, but some folks, the approximate doubling of compute power every 18 months. It's sort of a back of the envelope type calculation, and married that with forecast accuracy and other quantities in meteorology. And there's a nice correlation between the the growth in technology and the capabilities of the technology we have at
Mhm.
all levels to observe the current weather, to do calculations and analyze just the current weather situation, and then obviously to render these equations and everything in increasing mathematical detail because you can throw more compute power at it. I thought that was a very nice synergy there that we have, and I think that that comes out in your book a little bit, and sort of the progression and how you walk through sort of the historical pieces, but also brings us to the current day.
Yeah, and I should say, I mean, I remember the conversation around Sandy, and a lot of it was focused on computing power.
Mm-hmm.
And I just knew from the beginning it couldn't be raw horsepower. It wasn't about how big your computer was. There had to be more pieces to it. So really, kind of teasing those pieces out was a lot of what I was after.
I have to say, I enjoyed it because it was readable, but it also, I felt like you got the. I don't think many meteorologists are going to read this and go, wow, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, I think that something tells me that I think every field, whenever they're represented in the mainstream media, and I don't mean the way we talk about mainstream in terms of politics, but in books and movies and just news in general, that my aviation brethren cringe at every television news story about anything aviation related, because it seems like we can't get any of the details. The broad strokes are correct, but we wind up showing a picture of a 747 when we're talking about a Cessna. But I feel like you did a really nice job, I think, of capturing enough of the detail in the book and in the stories that and it was consistent with my understanding of how things work. And that's not easy to do. So props to you for that.
Thanks. I should say my first book was about the infrastructure of the internet, and so the network engineers. I've yet to discover. I guess I'll discover pretty soon. Who's tougher about getting your facts right, the network engineers or the meteorologists? So
yeah, we're a vocal bunch. That's for sure. I had one more question, and I'm struggling with it. So Troy, you got a question, and buy me some time. Let me remember what this was.
It's great to have you with us.
Troy, I don't get your audio for some reason.
We had that problem a couple of weeks
ago. I bet you're using Safari, right?
I am.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. It's very look. I got everybody else. I use Safari all the time. That's my browser of choice. Yeah. And all of a sudden, this platform, when you use Safari, you don't hear everybody, and it baffled me for like
that's impossible.
Actually, I'm using Google, James.
So it's just strange. If you're using Safari, you won't hear everybody. So we have to. Nate will have to relay the question.
So relay the question. Let's do it that way.
I could switch too. It'd take me about 30 seconds.
No. You sound and look great. We're gonna leave it right here.
Right. But Nate,
sorry, Troy.
The thing that I was going to ask Andrew was, we've heard you talking about it. I've seen the discussion. This looks like a great book, Andrew. But who is your audience, Andrew, for this book?
So the question is, who is the audience for this book?
It's really a general audience. I mean, that's the thing. It's really about sort of, making this complex system as accessible to people as possible. Which means, it means the travelogue, it means telling stories about it. It means explaining every single term. Every time I put an acronym in, my editor says, I gotta take those out. So it's really meant to be a general interest book for interested lay public about how this infrastructure works. Not the science, but the technology.
Nate,
those things are fuzzy, but I think that distinction is really important.
And Nate, you back that up. You say it's a pretty easy read. You did it on a plane trip and a half. So, it sounds like a really fascinating book, Andrew.
I wish I knew how to read lips. I know.
Yeah, he says it sounds terrible, and he's not ever going to read it. I'm just kidding. says it sounds like a fascinating book, and I agree. I thought I'm not. Like I said, I'm not a big fiction guy, generally speaking, but and it takes a long time. I start a lot of books. I don't finish many.
That's I have the same problem. It's why it's pretty short. Yeah.
This is easily the longest single book I've read since I finished my master's. So at 100.
Oh no! Don't.
Yeah. So
it's a thin. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, it's very readable and things are explained, and I feel like anytime you do something for general audience, you have to pick and choose your battles, right? You got to decide what is really important enough to include, what helps advance the story.
Yeah.
This is not a meteorological textbook.
Yep.
But it's a story. It's a collection of stories around a particular topic. And when you get into the technology and the terminology, you explain what you have to, but don't get into the weeds, which is like I said, is not easy to do.
And I should say, I mean, my whole process is to spend, as many hours as people will have with me, with really technical people, and then kind of decide what to leave out. That's the thing. It's, because a lot of the folks who really make these systems, they have really good, really comprehensive view of how it all works. But I really feel like the sort of, the choosing how to, what pieces to pull out for, to make it into a story, to make it readable is the thing I can try to bring to it.
What was the biggest surprise, the biggest thing you didn't expect as you were doing the research and writing? What knocked you off guard?
I think, certainly the models, to try to explain how the models work as best as I could. I mean, that was the Everest of this project. That just, and I did it first and I spent months on it, talked to as many people as I could. But it really meant, I knew that to sort of describe that was going to be the heart of the book. And they never got any less complex than they were at the beginning. But I ended up on a couple key kind of visuals that I thought really helped me. I mean, the first was the idea of the model not as a meat grinder, not as just one big algorithm where the present goes in and the future comes out, but to really recognize that the models were a kind of ongoing concern, that they were a sort of global simulation of the atmosphere, and that were then matched up with the observations. So I kind of had this image of of two Earths, the model Earth and the real Earth. Mm-hmm. And, they're kind of constantly trying to get them to match up, 6 hours at a time or 12 hours at a time. That was really helpful to doing it. So that was a big piece, but it was surprising, and the complexity was really surprising.
Who was, along those same veins, you met a lot of interesting characters. Who was the most interesting person that you talked to? Whether they actually made the final, I'm sure they made the final copy, but you never know, right?
Do you guys know Jeff Anderson at UCAR in Boulder?
Know the name?
Yeah.
He was amazing because he reminded me of the guy in War Games of Dr. Falcon, with and he's up there at the Mesa Lab, that crazy building up above Boulder. And he was the one who kind of was, totally separated from the daily operations of models. But he was one who really explained data assimilation to me, because I think, if you understand how models work, you got to understand what that interface is between, the atmosphere inside the model and the atmosphere, on the real world, and how you match them up, and to recognize that just wasn't automatic, but there's a whole process of matching them up. Really kind of made me see the seams between reality and prediction, and then how it goes back to reality. I mean, that's really the crux of it for me.
What do people, what does the general public get wrong about weather forecasters and weather forecasting in general?
That's a loaded question. Yeah.
Well, I think I don't intend it to be. I think,
No.
And it sort of comes back to that idea that, when, we touch this thing all the time, but we don't, a lot of people don't understand fully what's in there. And I think there's a difference between just, not understanding and acknowledging that, there are things about it I don't know and I don't need to know.
Yeah.
But things that people think they know that they're actually are not right about. And is there, and sort of the second part of that question is, what can we as people in the weather enterprise do to bridge that gap?
It's interesting. I mean, I'm on Twitter. I listen to the show. I kind of have a sense of some of the competing camps between, with the apps and the social media and all those things. And I came into it as an impartial observer. So I could sort of begin to discern what some of the fault lines were. And I think I really, the best way I can describe it is as a bit of a lag. I think that there's the technology has changed so fast. The extent to which the models in particular are so fine grained, are really, have a lot of potential, not just at 2 days, but at 5-6 days. And the way in which there's still a bit of a, the human interface, there's still, I'd call it a hedge. There's still a kind of sense that maybe this isn't right in a way that we should communicate to our audience. Or there isn't as much of a sort of community of a real I mean, it's the uncertainty question.
Mhm.
There are times where it might rain is a great forecast. There are times when we're sure it's going to rain, at 5 o'clock, 6 days from now, and there's times when you're not sure. And I think that's something that that even if you have a rhythm, if there's transparency to the sort of rhythm of the model outputs, especially 3, 4, 5 days, especially in the medium range, I think that begins to come clear. I mean, I remember it was a really vivid moment this past winter in New York City. We had a snow day, or De Blasio, our mayor, called a snow day at I think it was at 6 o'clock the night before. And I'd been following you guys on Twitter, and I knew that the latest model run had said no, it's not going to snow, but there was some delay in that communication to the mayor, or he wanted to call snow day anyway. But it was that sort of I just couldn't believe the kind of even from the outside, even just with Twitter, there was a sort of asymmetry in the mayor's understanding of when the latest information was going to be available. And I think that's partly because there is this assumption that the models are a bit of the wizard behind the curtain, when in fact for anyone who uses an app, particularly one that is is a sophisticated sort of forecasting engine based on the models. I think we sort of there's more going on there. I think we can take it, I guess is the point.
So
I see Troy's question here.
Yeah. So Troy's asking, he says he thinks sometimes the public gives us too much credit. That's sort of the flip side of that question. Maybe, are there times where they give us too much? Do you agree with that?
Again, there's such a big divide between between the extreme events and the sort of day to day, and I think we got to separate those two things. I think that there's I think that people are weird in what they hear. I mean, I know that as a journalist, you say things and people hear strange things. And it's hard to say the thing, get everybody to hear the thing you're trying to communicate, and that's a whole skill. But I do think that I do think that some information is being left on the table. And I understand, television with the compressed time, it's got a whole lot of challenges. But I do think that the transparency into the models, you begin to understand the system in a way that you can take it more seriously. But I acknowledge as well that for meteorologists, it makes a real transition, from it said there's a risk that you're saying the computer's doing my job, when in fact it's the communication that I feel like there's so much more potential with now that the forecast really has improved in our adult lifetimes. There's a big difference from 15 years ago. I mean, that's remarkable to me.
Mark?
So if we look at the case of last year's hurricane season as a great example of this, we have Florence, which was very well forecast in terms of its track, as was Michael. The track for Michael was very well forecast, but
just not as much of it.
Yeah.
Different outcomes. That Florence was forecast at one point several days out to be a Category 4 hurricane at landfall in North Carolina, and it weakened. Saffir-Simpson scale wise, of course, we know what happened with the rain, etc. Whereas Michael was forecast to be but a tropical storm at the first advisory, and it made landfall as a Category 5. So it's interesting to talk about. I guess a lot of people want to know. My wife will look at her app. Is it going to rain? Is it going to storm when we go to the beach? Is it going to rain? But these extreme events, such as the hurricane, the track and that forecast has gotten so much better, but there's still so much to learn intensity-wise. I can't wait to read this book. Do you cover the intensity of storms in the weather machine and how we have a long way to go? What do you make of that? I mean,
to Nate's point about this being a slim volume, it cracks me up how many times people have said to me, "Oh, the book about the weather, it must be about this," and the answer is almost always no. But what is there is the question of uncertainty, and so I guess the question, the thing that I would sort of ask with Michael and with Florence is if the uncertainty was properly communicated, because I think that, that's the part that I think is the most difficult for the public to understand. I think it's the most difficult thing for meteorologists to let go of, and so, if and it's not just about a cone, but it's also about intensity. And it's also the recognition that storms are different. So one storm you might be sure about, and the next storm, might be harder. I mean, that's sort of the nuance of that communication between meteorologists and emergency managers and mayors and governors, is a major pickle. It's a pickle we didn't have, 20 years ago, because the forecast wasn't good enough. I mean, Harvey, I think, was a great example as well. Because it was a moment where the models spit out something really crazy, and it seemed impossible. It defied all past experience. The numbers were off the charts. It was a pretty good forecast, I think. And there was this lag between what the technology has been able to do and what we humans are listening to and hearing from and how we're prepared to make decisions based on it.
That's right. 1 second. So he's right. We talk about Michael as an example. I remember being on Highway 98, working my way to the west, setting up these unmanned cameras, and we would encounter people that, what are you guys doing? And when we'd talk to them, and they would say, well, they always say it's going to do this, and they're full of that, and so forth and so on. And then the one thing they kept asking us that night, Tuesday night, the 9th, do you think it's going to be as bad as they say it will? And I was like, you need to expect that it'll be worse. And so it's interesting. The bottom line is, you're right, this communication and what people are expecting from what they hear, it is tremendously fascinating. And perhaps because there are so many people, it is an unsolvable problem in terms of getting everybody to be on the same page. I believe that's an accurate way to describe it. It's an unsolvable problem. There's just too many people. You can't put all that toothpaste back in the container, right? And Michael was just another example of that, because boy, just 14 years earlier, people were asking me the same thing about Katrina.
Yeah.
Is it going to be as bad as they say? It's like, it just starts asking, who is they, and where do you get your they, and just whatever. And that was before social media, now almost 15 years ago.
Right.
Is this in some ways a problem of our own making? Because if you think about it, and I'm going to leave the hurricane realm for a second, but if we go back, 20, 30 years, where stations were doing a 3-day, a 4-day, a 5-day forecast, and we're predicting day 5 with the same precision, which we are implying accuracy that we know we don't have. But we're going out there, and really the only uncertainty we ever really talked about was, a little bit of uncertainty about hurricanes with like strike probabilities and stuff like that. I remember those old classic graphics from like the Weather Channel based on the Hurricane Center product. But, most of forecasting for the longest time was just straight up deterministic. Here's our best guess. I'm not going to tell you anything about, whether I think is a good guess or not. I'm just going to throw it up there because my boss expects me to crank out 120 hours worth of forecast. And now we're going out 7 days, 10 days, some places 14, not to mention the 45. But it feels like, but we're trying to layer all this nuance and uncertainty information into this. And it's hard, I think, for a lot of us to do that in a way that doesn't feel wishy-washy. That doesn't feel like, in a very real way, we are providing more information than we ever have, not just out in time, but also in the depth of information and the uncertainty and the metadata and all this other stuff. But to the public, I think a lot of times it feels like we're less sure than they hear it as we're less sure than we were 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's funny in Norway, for example, the government, the weather service puts a green, yellow, or red on the website for every forecast. High confidence, medium confidence, low confidence. And that's a simple thing, but I think it begins, sort of simple way of saying we're really sure about this. This matters. We're going to be even more sure a day from now. And then there are days where, hey, it might rain. And even it might rain, functionally might be a good forecast. And I think again, it's like you can talk about whether or not it's worth it to carry your umbrella. Depends how much you care about getting wet. You can talk about whether it's worth it to evacuate a city. Incredibly catastrophic sort of consequential decision. I've been pointing a lot at Cyclone Fani. Last month. That was 20 years later, 20 years ago in India, tens of thousands of people killed, same kind of storm. And here was enough confidence in the forecast, not just that the forecast was farther ahead, but enough confidence in the forecast to evacuate 1 million people. And that's, it's that kind of, that certainty that I think we're, it feels new to the general public, I think.
Interesting.
I think it feels new to a lot of meteorologists. I think we've, in a sense that we've never really been able to talk about it and to quantify it in the way that we can today. And I think, a lot of times we do it with an incomplete knowledge of how things are going to play out, in the sense that, we know, for example, that there's certain situations where the GFS ensemble, this whole suite of models, sometimes doesn't capture what the actual solution is. It's under dispersive. And now we're identifying those cases and trying to just sort of solve for those and expand the model's capability to at least capture those when they're a possibility. But this is fairly new, I think, for us too, because again, 20, 25 years ago, really the only uncertainty we talked about with any regularity was the chance of rain, which we've got plenty of research to show that that's not very well understood. And I think your point about, what value is there in carrying an umbrella tomorrow? Well, it depends on how much you care about getting wet. If you're out walking the dog in your pajamas, who cares, right? If you're walking from a hotel to another building in Midtown because you've got a big meeting or a job interview, well, you care very much about that.
Yeah. And that's and I think that that's the heart of it. And it's only enabled by the most recent development of the tools. It's only enabled by the last decade of technology and its accessibility. And not only that, but it's also automated to a certain extent. It's also it's there in the outputs that are made legible for non-meteorologists. But to sort of to communicate that in a way that's consequential for people's lives, I think is still a very tricky task. I mean, I was driving my softball coach parent, driving him nuts all spring because he'd say, "So, is it going to rain? Is it going to rain?" I'm not a meteorologist, but I can, a lot of the time,
you play one at the newsstand.
I play exactly. But it's like, well, it might, and that's for, especially with this crazy rainy spring we've had, that was a pretty good answer. But it was fascinating to me that, even just simple things. And again, this is an app issue, but it's not an accuracy issue on the app's part. It's a communication issue on the app's part. There's the emoji switches over to rain. It's going to be a rainy day. It turns out the sun's still out and everyone's pissed off. And I think that that's indicative of how much nuance there is that in the technology, how much nuance is being spit out, and how often the sort of highs and lows are clipped off, and the hour by hour is smushed down. So it's, to hedge your bets. And I think there are moments where where the forecast, whether it comes from your app or comes from a human, could be a bit gutsier. When the confidence is high. And I think as I understand, you do have some insight into moments where that confidence is high.
I think some people might hear gutsy and hear hype.
Really? I think
so. I don't know. Troy, Mark, what do you think? I sort of think, I look at some of what our colleagues in severe weather markets do, and even though it is supported in some cases by science, we still give them a hard time for doing it.
Well, I think in the case of hurricanes, that we see it in the discussions. Oftentimes they talk about their confidence and what they're doing to increase the confidence. And I think it helps the public to maybe have more confidence in the forecast, even if the forecast is not very confident.
And sometimes you don't have to have confidence in the forecast to have confidence in what people need to do about it.
Right.
I think we're terrible at those situations. Like we want to focus on the uncertainty piece, because I think, in some ways it's the new and shiny thing. But at the end of the day, for the vast majority of people a day out from a hurricane landfall, whether it goes 100 miles this way or that, you still need to leave. The reason you might need to leave might be different. But at the end of the day, you still need to leave.
I think it's interesting things, even the 12-hour rhythm of the major models, at 3-4 days out, the National Hurricane Center is going to post its outlooks on its own schedule. But if you're a moron on Twitter, as we all are, it's when the euro is coming out, and you can you already have transparency into what new information is changing this outlook. That's not going to be the only piece, but it's a different piece. Oh, here we go, James. I'm ready for you.
Yeah, so again, so here's my problem with a lot of this stuff. So and understand, I'm down here in
I've been waiting
air
for this moment
mass.
for a long time, Dave.
No. I've been dealing with some local issues here, but
By the way,
I had to
I'm
jump
gonna
in.
stop for a second because if this were a television show, we would clip out Andrew's last sentence. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. That would be the soundbite that we wrap into the promo for this show. Go ahead.
And that is the show title.
Yes.
So this is air mass country down here. It's summer days.
Mhm.
Between now and the end of August, really into early September, every single day, just about every single day, we have random
Mark
air
and I
mass
know about this too. We live in that world too.
thunderstorms. Right. So people get their fancy app from IBM or the weather company or Weather Channel or Country Boy Eddie or wherever, and it says that they'll look at this thing before they go to work in the morning at 7:00, and it says it's going to rain in their neighborhood at 4:12 this afternoon.
Mhm.
There's no skill in that. There is none. Zero. None. It's like me telling you what the weather's going to be like on Christmas Eve of this year. Well, what's going to do at 3:00 on December 24th? You've got better luck, playing pickup sticks with your butt cheeks than this thing being right. So, and this is what I fight.
There's another one.
And so, what they do, they come back. They come back to us. Yeah, they come back to us when it's wrong, and they crawl all over us. And so, I think we have to do a better job of communicating. There are some things that we can't do in this science. So it's not there.
Yeah, so I think that's a great example. But the counter example is at the Masters this year. Push the tee times up so that everyone can finish sooner, because we know the front's coming through at 3:30. And that was an amazing example where, it's going to rain at 3:30. I understand it's different.
But understand that's in the spring, and that's with the synoptic scale weather system, the westerlies. It's a whole different set of circumstances. Yeah. And I totally agree. There is great skill in that. And I think we maybe are a little timid in pushing the envelope. I totally agree with that. But there are just some things we can't do. And every generation thinks they're going to get it. They're going to nail it. But tomorrow, let's say tomorrow morning, June 25th, I'll write a forecast across all these platforms that I do. And I can't help people. I don't know exactly when and where it's going to rain at 4:15 in the afternoon. Nobody does. I don't care. You can be, Dr. Uccellini, whoever. Nobody knows. And I constantly challenge those involved in research. I'm just a low-level practitioner down here. I'm a stooge that's on television. But I'm challenging them to, let's see what we can do about convective initiation with air mass storms. And there's been some ideas and some progress, and I read every paper that comes out on that. And I've seen some pretty good work from NASA with some satellite imagery, but we're just not there yet. So I still think we have to communicate the limitations of what we just can't do.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, again, it's different weather up here, but I often see the opposite. I often see, it's going to rain. Tomorrow's a good example. It's going to, we've had a beautiful stretch of 4 days. It's going to rain tomorrow morning.
I brought that with me, by the way.
You're rather good. But tomorrow morning, and I've been playing this game on Twitter, totally for kicks. But each day, I've been taking a little screenshot, of the forecast for tomorrow, and to see that line not move for a week, to see that this, little bit of rain, nothing big, is going to come, Tuesday morning, and to see that truly 7 days out, plain as day, accessible to everybody. And again, is a little bit of dumb luck, but it's not the case all the time. But it's certainly there. It's pretty often. We're pretty used to up here. If it's going to be a rainy weekend, we know on Monday, that wasn't the case relatively long ago. So I'm certainly not saying it's all problem solved, but I think that the variability of it, I think that's smoothed out like so many things are by the internet, by our apps. They're not, and it leaves it for more human communication. But I do think that there's, even the transparency into the places where, where it's going to work and where it's not going to work, is something that the tools allow at the moment.
Well, Andrew, what do you think about AccuWeather's 45-day forecast?
I don't think anything of it. No, I mean, yeah.
Is that the I don't have an opinion, or is that the Southern I don't think anything of?
It's not, I know enough about I learned enough about the skill of the models to to take it certainly not literally, but maybe seriously. Certainly there are times where you see some indication from that the pattern's going to change and it's going to be hot 2 weeks from now. And I kind of get that. But beyond that specifics, I think even the sort of to recognize, a running score, 7 days out is what we're, where we're seeing, where we've been accurate at the moment. The geeks look at some of the model scores and can make sense of it. But the assumption is that you're not going to put a scorecard on your website or on your app, or because it's not something that's talked about. But the reality is you have those scorecards. I just think it'd be crazy, confidence meter, something like that, would be really interesting. And I'm totally spitballing here. Yeah, I don't want to do your job. It's too hard.
No. I was going to say, listen, we need this. I say this all the time. We need good criticism, constructive criticism to get better. We can't call everybody a troll and a hater. And by the way, Aubrey is dealing with some haters tonight. Oh yeah. Boy.
What'd she cut into?
She cut The Bachelorette
Lord,
for a tornado warning.
Well, there.
Oh boy!
So, but I was going to say, I listened to the show last week. I mean, the tornado stuff's incredible. I mean, the ability to sort of to sound the alarm at the right moments, and the impact that's having on saving people's lives. I mean, even different from Joplin. You listen to all the stuff about Weather Ready Nation. It's been an amazing 8 years in changing the game with this. Not only by sort of beginning to ring the alarm bells, 3, 4, 5 days out. But 6 hours and then half an hour and all that. And that's incredible.
But Andrew, if you could give some good constructive criticism to those of us that are doing this for a living, and
Mm-hmm.
of everybody on the show tonight, Troy's kind of retired and Nate's some big grand poopah. He runs NBC now, but I'm still doing this at my ripe old age. And there are many television meteorologists that listen to this show. What advice, after doing this book, and I can't wait to read this book, what advice would you give those of us that are in operational meteorology to improve ourselves?
Oh, it's a tough one. I think.
And be honest. Understand, you can't hurt my feelings. I have no feelings left to hurt, and I think that's true for everybody else on this show. So,
I think it really comes down to finding the right relationship, the right sort of mesh of the gears between the models, which I think you all admit are very powerful tools. You use them every day.
Tool being the key word there.
Sorry.
Tool being the key word there.
Tool. Yes, and then but find the mesh between the models and your communication. What you say for them, and then the impacts that you think they will have. And I think that's a really hard equation. But I think it means, I'm making this analogy up on the spot, but imagine if your pilot put some distance between themselves and the equipment on their plane. Said, well, I think I trust this technology, but there are moments where I'm not going to trust it, so I'm just going to keep it at arm's length. And I think kind of bring them, acknowledging that that these how powerful and how essential they are as tools. That's really what I've watched over the last 5 years is some of that, a kind of still a little bit of unwillingness to say, to pull back the curtain and see, what's going into these forecasts. I mean, even the sheer fact of, the rhythm of their updates, even the sheer fact of which model is sort of driving your forecasting. Is it the HER? Is it the GFS? When does one switch into the other? What kind of all of these things. The assumption is that the assumption again is that this is this is the chef in the kitchen. But I think I think that we're at a point where to embrace the capabilities and the astonishment of what the technology is giving us, I think is I think only helps the case in people being satisfied by the forecast that comes out and being able to make decisions based on that, which has to be all of our goal, of course, right?
I think your point about transparency and as a journalist, you live and die by that. But I think in the weather business, we're unintentionally holding things back, right? We're, and we need to be more transparent about it. And to James, your point, we need to be transparent and just say, I can't tell you at 7 a.m. where exactly the thunderstorms are going to pop up at 4 p.m. And maybe it becomes incumbent on us as the people, whose faces are on these apps and on television to go back to the people writing them and say, look, I need to have a way to be able to communicate this, in more detail than just an icon and a number. And I think we're sort of committed. I don't know that we're at a point where we're going to be able to say, well, I'm only going to give you 4 days worth of forecast because, I'm not really confident in days 5 and beyond. I don't know that that's going to work for the business models that you and I live under.
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe there is some room to talk about the confidence and to maybe present it in a slightly different way.
I mean, what a crazy thing it would be if your day 4 or day 3 had a big question mark on it.
I've worked for a guy who did that, and management didn't like that very much, even though the viewers loved it.
No, that's because it means, again, it's like, it's all about what decision can you make on it? I was laughing because it was exactly what I was thinking about. But I think on Twitter with Capital Weather Gang, Father's Day guys, you said it was going to pour. It was a beautiful day all day. And it's like, well, no, they didn't say it was going to pour. They said it might rain, but when you put yourself in the other guy's shoes and you say, well, they were going to go out to the gardens or wherever they were going to go and have a family outing, but they didn't because, there was a rain emoji, on their screen. And so, it works both ways. And the disappointment with that is real. But again, it brings in, how much do you care about getting wet? How consequential is it to be wrong in this case? And I think, and that's, I've heard that from Louis Cellini as well. He really wants forecasts, matter for the amount that you can make decisions based on them. That's what it comes down to. And my corollary to that is, the tools are better than they've ever been before. So the capability to hone in on those, to help people with those decisions farther out in advance or closer up with more confidence is there. Not in every situation, but certainly a lot of situations, that progress is real.
All right. Well, listen, it's 30 after. We got to take a quick break here for Tony Rice and the astronomy report. We're going to come back. We need to talk with Mark a little bit too. And Andrew, can you stay for a few minutes? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So let's take a quick break for Tony. We'll come back with more. We'll do picks of the week. Aubrey's not going to be able to do email tonight. She has her own email problems.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The June solstice arrives this Friday, June 21st at 11:54 a.m. Eastern. This is about 5 hours and 48 minutes later than it happened in 2018. Each solstice arrives about a quarter day later than the previous year. This is because the relatively tidy 365-day-long Gregorian calendar doesn't align all that well with the 365-day, 5-hour, 48-minute, and 46-second-long solar year. So, next year, the solstice will arrive on June 20th, UTC time at least, thanks to the February 29th leap day that's added, nearly every 4 years, in an attempt to bring the solar and calendar years into a little better alignment. Elsewhere in the sky, look for Mercury and Mars, just half a degree apart in the evening twilight early this week, low on the west-northwest horizon. The twin stars of Pollux and Castor in the Gemini constellation can be your guide. Mercury and Mars will be visible together throughout June, widening to about 4 degrees apart by the end of the month. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink, by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Let's take a quick little break here and talk weather that is currently happening on, this is June 24th. Mark, you got no tropical action, man. What's going on here? You got a lot of dry air, a lot of dust out there, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly typical this time of the hurricane season. And here we are. I mean, there's not much happening. The Eastern Pacific trying to spit out its first named storm. And we'll keep waiting. You know, climatologically, we don't see things pick up until the end of August anyway. So nothing too unusual about the Saharan dust. A lot of talk about how high the precipitable water values have been over the Sahel this year. And some interesting observations from weather Twitter about that and how that might sort of promote a more active tropical wave train. We'll see. But for now, yes, things are nice and quiet.
And I will say the dust is made for amazing, amazing sunset scenes here. I can't tell you. And I just during the show, if I had to guess between all the platforms, email, Facebag, Twitter, the Gram, I've probably had at least 500 pictures, and they're just all stunning. And this is the one time where I wish I had a window here, but these pictures are my window to the world. But Mark, real quick, your thoughts on August and September? What happens this year?
Oh, put me on the spot.
That's what we do on this show.
Yes.
That's another show title.
You're right. Well, the El Nino seems to be not doing so well, and so we're certainly not in any kind of a strong El Nino, and El Nino typically puts the damper on Atlantic hurricanes. The way I look at it, it looks like the Atlantic is kind of like a college football team that should have a good year. Now, this is a weird analogy because a college football team having a good year and the Atlantic having a good year can mean two different things for people in the consequence department, but you never know until kickoff, so to speak. And as the season progresses, you know, you think about Alabama or Auburn or whomever, NC State, Carolina for Nate, you know.
I was waiting until you went there.
You just never know. But you say, hey, look, it's got a good recruiting class. The quarterback looks great this year, good coaching staff, et cetera. And you can look at that and say, well, the Atlantic is not really cold down in the deep tropics. It's a little bit warmer than it should be, but not overwhelmingly so. The bottom line, the season should perform climatologically about where we would expect it. 10, 12, 14 named storms, 6, 7, 8 hurricanes, 2 or 3 of them becoming major hurricanes. That would be what I would expect. Where do they end up? I have no clue. That's where we have to obviously just stay tuned and be ready. We just don't know.
Where do they recurve into the westerlies?
Right.
We'll find out.
That's the one.
Andrew, Andrew, are you in New York? I'm sorry.
I'm in New York. Yep, I'm in New York City.
Yes. So, Nate, you're in New York.
I'm in New York. I'm sitting right on the edge between Midtown and Hell's Kitchen. Which I have to tell you, I had the opportunity to walk around a little bit this evening, and it's not the stereotype. It's actually rather nice.
Okay, I don't get to New York that often.
Mm-hmm.
The last time we stayed there, it was pretty close to Central Park around Columbus Circle.
Yeah.
You know, the big Apple store and the plaza and all that there.
Not far from here.
Where is Hell's Kitchen in relation to that part of
Hell's
Manhattan?
Kitchen is west and a little bit south of there, so it's southwest of Central Park.
Okay. Well, so fellas, what's happening in New York? Anything exciting? I noticed that we had some pretty rough storms obviously in Aubrey's territory tonight, but I guess it's quiet up there, huh?
Yeah, I think we have some rain here tomorrow morning. Should clear out tomorrow afternoon, but then later in the forecast, we may be looking at upper 80s to near 90 later this week into the weekend.
In Aubrey, for those that don't know, Aubrey's a television meteorologist, and she works in a market in Virginia, Harrisonburg, and they had some tornado warnings for parts of West Virginia and Virginia, and she had to break into primetime programming, and she covered the ABC program, The Bachelorette. It's brutal. She sent us an email, and I just for a second went over to their Facebook page and read some of the comments, and it's just, oh, come on. But it's just life in this business. But I hate it. I just hate it for her. But it happens sometimes, and that's the reason she's not on the show. So we'll do a longer email segment next week. We've been in the land of the MCS here recently down here in the Deep South. We've had a northwest flow aloft, and MCS after MCS rolling through here. We had one this evening that moved out of our state over into Georgia. Atlanta took a pretty hard hit. I know the airport was hosed up. They had a ground stop, I think, for 2 hours there.
Meanwhile, I made it into LaGuardia early today, and there was even a gate open for us. I needed to go buy a lottery ticket.
How did that happen? I mean, that's supposed to be the worst airport in the world.
It was really, really good, and these things worked out. I mean, blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again.
So, Troy, what's happening out to the west in Texas? I see a bunch of storms west of you tonight.
Yeah, it's things have kind of quieted down around here. Now, I will tell you, yesterday, to speak of what you were speaking of, the northwest flow situation there in the southeast, I came out of Hartsfield at about 2:30 yesterday back to Austin. Amazing job by air traffic controllers and everything. We took off as a ground stop was starting. The thunderstorm was on the north side of the airport, between the airport and downtown, and pressing southward. In this pilot, we took off within 10 minutes of when we took off, the airport had a gust to 50 knots. So it was right there. And I talked to some people still at the hotel. We had a bunch of people there over the weekend. And as we took off, they watched us take off. They were getting some small hail on the north side of the airport ground. So, but once we got out of there, we found clear skies within 2 or 3 minutes, got around that thunderstorm. And you're right. They had another one this evening, James. I was watching that one as well. But here's the Central Texas story. And I'll see if you can go with me here, James. 4:14 this afternoon. Out at Austin Camp Mabry, which is our 100-plus year climate site here in Austin, we had a record temperature at about 4:14 this afternoon of 67 degrees. We had rain midday into afternoon, thunderstorms. 67 this afternoon at Camp Mabry ties the old record of the lowest minimum for this date set back in 2002 of 67. It was 67 degrees in Austin at 4:14 this afternoon. That's my pick of the week. That's my weather of the week. I like that one.
Can you send some of that 67-degree high temperature weather to North Carolina for about the next 3 months?
We'll see.
Miami today for a record high.
Oh yeah, 98.
Ooh.
Speaking of Hartsfield and weather, in about 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to have I'll get the gentleman's name. One of the meteorologists with Delta going to join us. So we're going to talk about how they forecast and some of how they have an entire weather. It's basically a weather center, a weather service serving the airline and their hubs, and they do it so well. Sort of going back to Andrew's point about sort of taking credit, right? Yeah. They do it so well that the FAA allows them to do some things based on their forecasts instead of the Weather Service forecasts for some of their hubs because they're so deeply invested in it.
Well, Nate,
so that's going to be a really interesting conversation that we'll have in late June, late July.
Yeah, and I was over there. I'm trying to think. It's been 10 or 12 years ago, but I was over there and got the chance to visit in Delta headquarters there for the day, up in the dispatch area, and where they had the meteorologist, and very, very impressive.
And Southwest does their own meteorology, I think. JetBlue, I think, has a contract with a consulting company, and other airlines work with various companies. But it's interesting to see how Delta and Southwest have sort of gone on their own. And at least in Delta's case, I can't speak for Southwest, but in Delta's case, they've done some really, really good stuff. So we'll talk about that here in a few weeks. We'll tease the future program.
The people up at Southwest have done quite a bit up in the Dallas area, and Becky, a friend of mine who graduated actually at Texas A&M about the time I did, is one of the people up there. And Rebecca and Becky, they do a great job up there.
Yep.
All right, so let's kind of morph into picks of the week here as the time is getting close to the top of the hour. So this is where we're going to go around. Everybody shares a pick, and Andrew, this can be your book. We don't care. I mean, you pick anything you want here in just a second, but let's start with Troy. Let's see if Troy's got a pick of the week this week. This can be anything weather related, website, hardware, software, you name it. Troy, got anything for us this week?
Well, a couple of things. I still stick with my 67 at 4:14 this afternoon in Austin, Texas. I still stick with that one. But a lot of people, I don't know whether y'all use it or not. I find it to be quite useful. How many people use the Weather Bell website for a lot of models and so forth? Just be aware. I love that website. big changes in the next week. The maps are making changes, and they're going to be making big changes in the website. They allowed us to make some comments about some things we wanted to see, but I really like WeatherBell. And I like that website, and I'm hoping our maps haven't changed that much as they begin to cycle through all that this week. But that's it from Texas.
Yeah, they're kind of going through an interesting transition, and I'm a customer. I've been a subscriber to their products for a long time, and Ryan Maui, who of course been on the show before, he pretty much came up with the mapping that they've been using for a long time. Well, their new map set does not involve Ryan. And it's different. And I've heard a lot of people griping about it, Troy, because it's different. But just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. And as you get used to it, you go from this old school random link page to something that's organized. And it just seems to work a little better for me. Troy, what do you think about the new look?
Well, the one thing that I had, and this is the whole thing where the WeatherBell people have been great in accepting input from us, just has to do with the idea my damn eyes don't work like they used to, and the maps and charts were smaller, and what they've done now is allowed you to get rid of the margin areas, which are your options, and then bring that image out to to more or less full screen. But James, they got back with me. I said, hey, my eyes are not going to be able to do this, and they said we're working on it. And in fact, I believe it is operational now on the website.
Yeah, I think, and again, they were very responsive. I had a lot of thoughts and suggestions and things I didn't see and things were missing, and they were really responsive, and that was pretty impressive. So they're phasing out that old site, I think, by the end of this month.
Friday, I think, at the end of the week.
Okay, at the end of the week. So again, and my pick of the week, it's going to be a site kind of explaining the, we're talking about the Sahara dust in the southeastern states and the NASA products that allow you to track that dust and how that works. That'll be my pick of the week, kind of an explainer. There's some pretty good products for visualizing where that layer happens to be. So that's my pick. Nate, what you got for us this week?
My pick of the week, so not last week, week before, was the AMS broadcast conference on weather warnings and communication. And one of the talks Friday morning was by Bree Smith. She's a meteorologist in Nashville, one of the chief meteorologists in Nashville. And it was about gender equity in our industry, both in television, but also really across all of meteorology. Those of you who come to these conferences know that the talk's generally 12, 13 minutes, a couple of minutes for questions. She went 30. She could have easily gone an hour. And because I felt like that topic was something that we need to have an honest conversation about. And I know we've talked about that in the past when Ginger Z's been on the program. But a really good talk. The talk itself the recording should be posted within the next week or so. And so the link to the abstract for that talk will be my pick of the week. And when the recording shows up, it'll post there as well.
Awesome. All right, Mark, what you got for us? You can pick your movie, your documentary, or you can pick anything you want to. I'm just saying this is your opportunity for a plug here.
Well, I appreciate that. And related to the documentary, my pick of the week is an area that I didn't know too well at all until Michael, and that's what's called the Forgotten Coast down in Florida. And it's this area pretty much east of the Panama City Beach region on over towards the Big Bend, including St. Mark's. At least that's what I included in. It's an incredible area, and a lot of it was impacted by Michael. And if you want to visit an old part of Florida that is quaint, that Highway 98 west from St. Mark's, you come south out of Tallahassee on, I think, 319, and you can go west on Highway 98 all the way over to Mexico Beach into Panama City. There's some hurricane history there, certainly, especially now. But it's just a great area, great people, and you get to know these people. So, they're struggling, but they remain wonderful Americans who are coming back from an incredible disaster. And my pick of the week is the Forgotten Coast. I don't want it to be too forgotten.
Awesome. And again, I spent much of last week at Cape Sandblass, and it was just stunning how beautiful it is. And they're working hard. The trading post is back. Many of the restaurants are back, but there's still struggles. And by going to visit, spending some time there, that's probably the best thing you could do.
Let them know you're here. Let them know you care.
Yeah, let them know that you love them and you're thinking about them, and you're there, and you're coming back. And I told them I'll be back next year. I mean, I will be back to support you guys, and they really appreciate that.
They do.
All right, Andrew, your turn. What you got for us?
I won't be bashful about it.
Yes.
Yes, there you go. I mean, I've been working on this for 5 years. Publication is tomorrow. An hour and 10 minutes from now, you'll be able to download the electronic copy. And I've been waiting to say that for a very long time. There's an Audible book as well. I didn't read it this time. Thank you, Nate.
Why not? Why
didn't I
not?
read? I read my other one. I think
He wanted you to do it, James, but you wouldn't answer his email.
The audiobooks have changed. They're serious business now. So it's all done by professionals, unless you've got unless you're a famous voice. So James, we should have called. But I do think, the fun of this was knowing that, the weather modelers are going to enjoy the satellite chapters because they won't know those pieces, and the weather history folks are going to like the model pieces because they don't know that part. And it was really about, picking, being very, very judicious about picking the best stories from each of these different parts and putting them together. So it's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be read.
Awesome. So print, electronic, Audible. It's all going to be there.
Oh, it's all there.
When does the Audible version come out, Andrew?
In 70 minutes.
Wow. Because this is how I read books. I listen to them by nature of my schedule. Like tomorrow, I'll be on the road for 2 hours going to a small town called Double Springs, Alabama, speak to a group. I'll come back 2 hours. That's 4 hours of drive time. That's when I read books by listening to them.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to pass.
It'll
all right.
Yeah.
I'm all in. All right.
Excellent.
Listen, guys, we're on the air here in a few minutes. I don't think they would appreciate me wearing the Judge Schmales 2020 You'll Get Nothing and Like It shirt on the news tonight.
I'll pay you $5 if you do it.
Yeah. I'll need a new job with NBC when they fire me. Andrew, first off, if anybody wants to get in touch with you or ask a question, are you on the Twitter? What's the best way to do that?
Twitter is AJ Blum, AJBLUM. That works. My website's andrewblum.net. My email's on there as well. So happy to hear from people.
Okay, Mark, what's your contact information?
Now the brand Hurricane Track. So Hurricane TRACK, hurricanetrack.com, at Twitter, at Hurricane Track. Thanks, James.
And get on Amazon Prime and watch that documentary. I can't wait.
Congrats, Mark. Yeah.
There you go. So we got to wrap this thing up here. So let's roll the music. And we are typically on the air Monday nights. We're back on our regular schedule. We did a special Thursday night a couple of weeks ago to get the vacation weekend. But anyway, if you want to get in touch with us, our email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. The show notes, all of our social media accounts on the website as well. So most people watch on YouTube. They watch us live.bigbrainsmedia.com. But we know most of you listen, and we thank you for the time you've given us this week. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a marvelous week.
Good to see you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.